Let us start with our first panel discussion of the day. As part of the Swachh Bharat Mission, India is committed to achieving the goal of Lakshya Zero dump sites within the mission's time frame. Under the leadership of the Secretary, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, the proposal for complete remediation has been approved for 280 cities. Through this panel discussion, Reclaiming the Squandered Fortune, Legacy Waste Management and Dump Site Remediation, a tool for reducing the harmful impact of landfills on health and environment, we will try and find answers to many crucial questions about legacy waste management, including the current and future plans for legacy waste management, what needs to be done further to reclaim the acres of lost land, and what are the possible end-to-end solutions for this. The session will be moderated by Dr. Sunil Pandey, Senior Fellow and Director of the Environment and Waste Management Division at TERI. Dr. Pandey has more than 30 years of experience. He has also represented TERI as a solid waste management specialist in task forces with the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy and Ministry of Environment and Forest. On the panel, we have with us Mr. Arun Murugesh, Vice President, Sales Marketing at Sahas Zero Waste. Mr. Arun is an experienced waste management professional driving circular initiatives through decentralized waste processing and deciphering plastics. He is also skilled in product design and operation of MRFs, and planning and execution of reverse logistics in waste management. We also have Mr. Prabhakar Lingareddy, Executive Vice President and Head of Social Investments at ITC Limited. An ex-alumni of Accelerate Jamshedpur, he has been associated with ITC for 19 years in different capacities across the business. He specializes in sustainability, performance management, compensation management, leadership, and talent development. Next, we have Mr. Swapan Mehra, founder and CEO of IORA Ecological Solutions. Mr. Mehra is an environmental, finance, and climate policy expert with over 16 years of experience in developing climate change mitigation and adaptation projects. He was also a member of the Waste to Wealth mission at the Office of Scientific Advisor to the Government of India. Our next panelist is Mr. Nagesh Prabhu, co-founder and director of Sigma Global Environ Solutions Private Limited, which is a pioneer in introducing integrated landfills mining in India and is working towards the eradication of legacy waste landfill sites in India. A graduate of the Dublin Business School International MBA program, Ireland, Mr. Prabhu also holds a BTech in Electrical Engineering from Manipal University. Last but not the least, we have Mr. Deepak Arora, President of Public Affairs and Head of CSR at Naira Energy. Mr. Arora has been associated with organizations of repute like the SR Group, Cairn India, International Finance Corporation, etc. He is an influential public affairs specialist with strong business acumen and has worked closely with government in more than 10 countries. I request all the panelists to please come on stage and take their seat. To you, Sunil, sir.
Thank you, Mitali, and thank you also to India Sanitation Coalition and FICCI for organizing this key event, key panel discussion as a part of two-day event. And as Mitali told in the opening session, we know that legacy waste has been a problem in most of the cities and causing a lot of not only contamination, but also a lot of waste of resources, which we expect that our panelists will, from their diverse background, will bring those aspects out on how dump sites which have been problem or legacy waste sites which have been problem in the cities can become a source of resource and also unlock, as the background note which has been shared with you says, unlock the land potential of the area which is under these dumping sites. And actually, historically, if you see, the problem of legacy waste remediation in the country was discussed primarily because there was a realization that in most of the cities, these legacy waste dump sites are in the core part of the city now, no longer in a peripheral area where rural population or semi-urban population stays. They're right in the city. And land value, not only for the area which is under the dump site, but also the neighboring land value suffers because of that. Not in terms of real estate value, but also in terms of nuisance which such unregulated, unmanaged dump sites create. In large cities, we have evidences of fire in every winter, every summer, because of uncontrolled release of something which we call methane coming out of these dump sites. Sometimes the waste which is coming to the dump site is also put on fire, which becomes a problem. We know how Delhi chokes in winter, and this because of air pollution, and these landfill fires also add to the pollution which is already caused by several factors, including industry, including vehicles, including agri residue burning in the season. So with this opening remarks, not taking more time, what I'll do is I'll ask my panelists to give their views on legacy waste dump site remediation issues. And the way we have planned the discussion sessions is that there'll be 2 rounds of question, and each of these panelists, we have a specific set of questions from them, and they would spend some 4 minutes around in providing their views. And and then after that, there will be second round. And in the end, we hope that we'll have around 10 minutes left for question answers from these panelists, which you might have on this very important issue of dump site remediation. So I'll start with Mr. Nagesh Prabhu, who, as the introduction said, is known for pioneering the work on landfill mining or biomining, who was one of the early starters on the aspects of biomining in the project, biomining for the legacy waste dump sites. And in the background note, if you see that the government of India had given some targets to cities to basically come out with remediation of these dump sites by 2023 and balance of sites to be remediated by 2024, and we are much behind those targets. So in a way, you can say that targets are more aspirational in nature, but they have suddenly catalyzed the action in the legacy waste remediation process. So what I'd like to ask Mr. Prabhu is basically what are the problems which he anticipates if these remediation sites are not kind of remediated in the time frame which has been prescribed, which is almost immediately, and how his organization like his can collaborate with potential municipalities and cities, because if you look at definition, any dump site which is holding more than 1,000 tons of waste has to be remediated. So how his organization can play a role, and how they can work broadly with India Sanitation Coalition to further this issue. So,
thanks, Sunilji. As Sigma, we were co-founded in 2015, and it's been 9 long years. But if you look at our contribution, we've roughly processed about 9 million tons of waste. That's legacy waste, and then out of which the most important part is we were able to channelize 1 million tons of RDF to the cement plants, one of the most important factors today, and all the rest being inerts. Now this led for us to reclaim about close to 650 acres of land and 22 dump sites across 9 states. Now this we could achieve over a period of 9 years. Biomining or bioremediation is today focal in the way that it has become less processing but more of RDF disposal and inert disposal, because every other company today is feeling that the challenge is about disposal of RDF, are there off-takers or not. So when you ask about challenge, I would call it more of disposal. I would rather say responsible disposal. We all know the consequences. The urban and local bodies today are on a double-edged sword, They have to reclaim the land in order to bring in a new infrastructure for fresh waste management. And when you talk about reclamation, it's a different scenario. Reclamation also is connected with what the corporations and municipalities are doing with the fresh waste, because on one hand we keep on reclaiming the land, on the other hand they keep using the same land to dump again. It serves no purpose. So it's important that the urban and local bodies make a strategy where the biomining is carried out, and parallelly there is a strategy for fresh waste management so that it doesn't get dumped back. Now why is that why is it getting on a slow pace? I would say that the kind of targets that the government of India has given, we need more and more large players to come into the foray. The biggest challenge that the large players today see is complete absence of ESG guidelines. There is complete absence of value to this whole process. I would say it is undermined. And number two is that the urban and local bodies are taking a lot of time to understand the cost involved in the said process. When you talk about ESG guidelines, it doesn't come cheap. And at the same time, we are talking about a process which involves compliances. There cannot be 90% compliance, 10% compliance. It has to be a compliance or not. Now, when you talk about compliances, it requires you to give in a lot of thought about costing. How much does it take for a company to dispose of the RDF, dispose of the inert? How much does it take for processing? So I think if more and more focus is given, and institutions like ISC come forward and work on this, where larger players come into the foray, that's when we can reach this target, an ambitious target, that's exactly why I started saying that even for 9 million tons, a company like us, which has about capacity of close to 25,000 tons of processing every day, we took about 9 years. Of course, the best part is we disposed 0.4 million tons of RDF in just 1 year, last 1 year. So there is an good potential. The cement companies are understanding the potential towards sustainability, getting RDF on board. The first year we started, we couldn't even do let's say 10,000 tons of RDF, and we finished 0.4 million tons last year alone. There is a ray of light, but the point is again two: one, the cost, and second, adherence to ESG guidelines, which I think Sunilji has to be given more importance on. Thank you.
Thank you for highlighting the issues which would enable large players to come into field of biomining and ensure that whatever targets which are set are met in time, so that these environmental impacts of such dumping of waste can be avoided. Our next panelist is Mr. Arun Murugesh, Vice President Sales, Marketing and Sahas Zero Waste. And Sahas Zero Waste, we all know that they have played a catalytic role in ensuring the segregation of waste is done right at the source of waste generation, and also looking at waste utilization at decentralized level to semi-decentralized level, if I can say that. And they have proven track record on waste utilization. So looking at expertise of Sahas Waste Zero on this, I would like to ask Mr. Murugesh on how they can play a role, because legacy waste remediation is a lot about salvaging the waste value out of mined out waste. So how Sahas Waste Zero can be a key partner there in ensuring the increased utilization, and if there are any challenges which they find there.
Yep, thank you, Sunilji. Good afternoon, everyone. So I represent this company, Sahas Zero Waste. So like the word Sahas Zero Waste goes, we need to have the courage to actually realize maximum resource recovery. And at our organization, we've been able to recover as much as 90+% from waste. So in accordance to today's theme, I would like to share a few instances of how we go about recovering waste. We have a nice slogan at our organization: once you mix it, you can't fix it. And that's very true to waste. So what does that mean? You have one bin at home and you mix your organic and inorganic fractions, or the wet and dry waste as we call it, and that's it. You can't do much with it anyways after that. So segregation at source, like Sunilji mentioned, is prime importance. Now, unfortunately, what happens in landfills is you find a lot of mixed waste, mixed as in the wet and dry are together. Now, recovery of resources from such waste is definitely a huge question mark. In fact, let me talk about the reality out there, and thanks, for getting out more important words, keywords for today as well, which is responsible waste management. We heard about Nagesh talking about ESG as well. So, if you manage waste responsibly, let's say you have a bin at home and you want to manage that waste responsibly, recover waste at the maximum possible, which is 90+%. You cannot run the operations through sale of waste. What I mean to say is the value that is created by waste, when you sell it, you cannot run full-fledged operations responsibly. Now, what do you mean by responsibly? First and foremost, environmentally responsible. You don't burn your waste for a start, because if you burn your waste, of course, it doesn't cost any money. You can manage it anyways. You don't dump the waste. So this is called as, dumping, which happens in landfills. You don't really, you try and make sure that the entire supply chain is ethical. Do you know that your waste actually could be handled by children? This is definitely a possibility out there, because 90+% of India works around the informal sector, and that is a huge concern. Where is your waste going? Would you want to go home today and track your waste and find out the horrible situation it's in? So these are all aspects around responsible waste management. And when you manage waste responsibly, you cannot manage the operations just by merely selling the waste. You need another component. So we create business models in waste management. We are a services industry. Waste management is not charity anymore. And when you want to create a business model, there are two revenue streams predominantly. One is, of course, the sale of waste, and the other is a service fee. It's called the polluter pay principle. So this concept is the ultimate about waste management. Now, when you come back into bioremediation or biomining, expectations that there is a business model when you unearth material, sell it, and you run your operations and make a lot of money out of it, does not exist anywhere. That is provided you're doing waste, you're operating in a very responsible way. So I would just like to end on that note, saying that now things like BRSR has been mandated by government for corporates to follow. So this is the next big deal for all of us. Watch out for this word called responsible sourcing out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Where you ended is basically looking at BRSR and possibility of corporates playing role in waste management, and their agencies. For example, our next panelist, Mr. Prabhakar, is representing ITC, and ITC is known for its work on different cities, looking at organizing workforce into collection of waste and deriving value from the waste from their WOW program. And so I would like to ask Mr. Prabhakar on how companies like ITC, out of their CSR budget, can look at playing a part in biomining if they see their role in legacy dumpsite rehabilitation, since that's the theme for the session. So, Mr. Prabhakar.
I think I'll probably address it in two portions, Sunil. Probably first talk of what we're doing in terms of the waste part of it, and maybe in the second round address this question. The point that was mentioned earlier was, yes, there are already legacy wastes, and we continue to accentuate the problem by sending more and more material to landfill. I think a big role that corporates, individuals, communities can play is how to put a brake on that particular process so that they don't accentuate that problem. And it is in that context that I'll share what ITC's approach is. I think corporates, big, small, medium, it has to now become a part of strategy. It can't be just something which I like doing. And like what Arun was saying, increasingly the expectations, whether it's from a statutory or a consumer angle, you have to be more responsible. So I'll break this into three sectors. So if I look at ITC, one is the infrastructure part of it. Second is the operations part of it. Third is the product part of it. And our initiatives cut across all these three. And finally, two important stakeholders where we work and should be working more and more is consumers and communities. So just for infrastructure, just like we are talking of responsible sourcing, etc., time has now come for responsible construction. And here when I'm talking of strategy or a goal, there are international benchmarks available today on what is the quantity of carbon emission that is happening per square meter. And some of our recent projects that we have undertaken, we sort of have benchmarked against those type of targets and said we'll operate less than that. To just give an example, we just set up a foods factory in Khurda in Orissa. The international benchmark is 675 kilograms of carbon dioxide per square meter. The whole plant that we have constructed is, we have actually achieved a number of 452, much lesser than 675. And fundamentally because of trying to use waste into the construction material. Fly ash instead of cement, that's one of the biggest usages that we have been looking at. I think it's equally important to focus on value engineering, where you have to design solutions which requires less and less of material consumption per se. Plastic formwork. We have actually sort of used recycled plastic, and people, I am not a civil engineer, but people who are civil engineers would link it to it, instead of the concrete casting. Looking at agrocrete blocks, which is essentially again replacing concrete using agri-waste per se. Now when you're looking at infrastructure like this, we spoke about guidelines, compliances. When you are replacing something, it's important to also understand, are they safe? And this is where I think it takes some time for corporates to sort of swing into a big scale, because it's safety of construction materials, safety of buildings, safety of warehouses, etc. But we have had a very good success there. The second part in terms of operations, it is essentially in terms of how can you reduce the waste that is getting generated, but at the same time, how do you sort of recycle the waste that gets generated? For us, we look at it in two components. One is hazardous waste and the other is non-hazardous waste. Hazardous waste, we have been actually able to recycle close to about 90% plus, and non-hazardous almost about 99% plus. And it is for this reason that we are what we call as solid waste positive for last 16 years. And it essentially means that we are recovering more waste than what waste is actually getting generated. And here, Mr. Sunil, you mentioned about WOW. Now, WOW is basically collecting waste from the environment and doing what? We're using that waste for our paper plant in Kovai as a raw material actually. And so that's one example of how you sort of work in operations. The third aspect is really in terms of products. How do you actually reduce the packaging material in all your products per se? And here our whole focus is in basically replacing the PET material. Whether if you look at us glycerin, Savlon glycerin, we almost sort of now 70% is post-consumer recyclate actually. How do you actually move into paper packaging? Morning I was referring to somebody in terms of the Ashirwad Atta packet, which typically is a plastic pack. Now we are now moving into a paper pack. But again, what we need to understand is you cannot shift immediately because it's a food product. You have to protect it from infestation, etc. We've now been able to achieve 50% replacement of plastic with paper actually. And like this, we have several other examples in products. Quickly to touch upon consumer, and I think that is something which is extremely important. We have to create an environment where consumers start demanding products which actually follow contemporary packaging practices, which produce less waste, but more importantly, consume the waste into packaging. And one of the ways that we've just started recently is trying to get children and consumers excited by saying the plastic that is used for packaging Yippee noodles, we are recycling to make parks, school benches, and this is a project that we have started. And the purpose really is to create an awareness and sensitization. The last part on community, this is where we've been working with different state governments and communities, and as we speak, roughly reaching about to 55 lakh households. And the primary focus is segregation at source and going for a decentralized model. And I would end by just giving one particular statistic which I started with. The studies that have been conducted not just by us but even by the government agencies and urban local bodies, in the catchment areas where we are working, the landfill, that is the waste that is going to landfill, is as low as 13%, which used to be close to about 90% plus before we started the project. So that's the extent of intensity and incidence that has got reduced, and therefore helping not creating further legacy waste.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Very interesting. Our next panelist is Mr. Swapan Mehra, and from IORA Ecological Solutions, and they work a lot in coastal areas. And if you look at pollution of coastal areas and pollution of marine waters, eventually the statistics says that around 80% of land waste which is disposed on land finally ends up into coastal waters. So, with that background, I'll ask Swapan Mehra to provide his views on the subject.
Thank you very much, Sunil, and big thanks to FICCI for inviting me here. I'm very privileged to be in this gathering. Like was mentioned in my introduction, I'd like to present views from two affiliations. I'm now part of IORA Ecological Solutions, which I founded many years ago, but in between I also left my own company, took a painstaking decision to work for the government for 2 years. I actually helped create and run the Waste to Wealth mission of the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Prime Minister. And at that time, one of the key responsibilities given to us by the Prime Minister's Science Council was to look at ways of making a business case for remedying landfills, biomining and remedying existing landfills. So first let me begin by talking a little bit about our work and our thoughts on how an organization like ours can help in managing waste flows and waste that goes into marine areas, and then I'll probably take 2 minutes to share some of my insights in landfill mining and what needs to be done. So one of the biggest challenges of marine macro litter, as it is called, is that there is a huge issue in terms of measuring what is the quantity of marine macro litter that enters our oceans every year through river pathways, streams and other sources. There are estimates, and mind you, these are official estimates of different very reputed organizations, which just for the Indian Ocean from India put this number at anywhere between 3 to 15 million tons a year. So that's 5 times the range. So I think that one of the most important thing that first needs to be done is just measurement and attribution of sources. Where is this waste coming from? How is it entering the oceans? This 1 trillion pieces of plastic that enter Indian Ocean, 1 trillion pieces as the World Bank estimates, where is it coming from? What are the sources? There are many advancements in technologies that can help this cause. Today, using a combination of high and mid resolution satellite data, which is something that our team works on a lot, you can actually map exactly which source is this coming from, what is the nature of the waste, also to the extent that very, very high resolution data, you can even look at the size of macroparticles, and you can do like a cluster analysis of different kind of packets that are entering the ocean. So I think that's a very, very major important thing to be done. There are also examples alternatively of community-based measurement. Goa has a very, very successful case study of small community-based organizations which have been trained to measure and develop intuitive maps of waste that is flowing into the ocean. So one thing very important to hence focus on is this idea of using a blend of technology, traditional wisdom and community action in coastal areas to be able to identify what waste is entering where. You know, when I was in the Principal Scientific Advisor's office, we did a global competition of technologies that can be employed to stop the waste from flowing into oceans. There is a range of technologies that are available which are not even very, very expensive. We piloted some of these. There are floating nets. There is an Indian company called Alpha Mers which has been trying to pilot this at scale for years. If the causation of what is, so the next step I'm coming to is how do we source investment for all of this? If the quantity can be linked to the damage, and if we can have a consequential marginal gain from avoiding the waste flow into oceans, there is an investment case to be built. This is something that we are working on. We are working on mapping, but also trying to build an investment case for deploying technologies that can stop this waste and can recover this waste. I think the third important thing is End of the day, we have to focus on reducing the amount of waste that's entering our rivers and flowing into our oceans, because it's critical not only from an ocean health perspective, but in our country from a livelihood perspective. A lot of our coastal population is suffering because of the waste entering our oceans, reducing their livelihood from fisheries. And from that perspective, I think the most important thing is community behavior change. So we are working with a sister concern who specializes in behavior to actually develop tools of behavior change using gamification, using digital means, which can be spread to many communities at the same time to convey the message of the cost of inaction, the cost of non-segregation, and the cost of disposal. These are some thoughts. There are very large projects working in this area, but I think that by providing these knowledge impetus, that we can act as a group, as a trim tab, which can steer these very large global projects into the direction that they should work on. If I can have a minute, I also want to talk a little bit about my landfill experience. I'll just take a couple of minutes. So, when we started working, the first landfill that was allotted to us in the Principal Scientific Advisor's Office was Ghazipur, because of its iconic status and because, for all the wrong reasons, bad iconic status, not good iconic status, and because of its proximity to Delhi. I want to build on, I want to give credit to Nagesh, because at that time we were engaging with a lot of companies, and a lot of my early education on landfills happened because of interactions with Sigma and their experiences. So thank you very much. And I realized that one of the fundamental issues affecting the overall idea of legacy waste and its treatment in India is that legacy waste is not going to pay for its own treatment. It's an underinvested area, and the problem is that the underinvestment manifests in much larger societal expenditure because of the problems the waste creates. If we are able to quantify the health and the social and the property loss values of a single landfill, I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the lakhs of crores, if not hundreds of crores. And that should prompt us to be able to utilize this as a basis to invest. We need to invest. There is no way to underinvest and treat this problem. So there is like 5 pillars that I want to quickly touch upon, which need to be institutionalized and implemented if these legacy waste sites have to be addressed. The first is scientific planning. For Ghazipur, we engaged a set of consultants, and we were able to do a plan which included slope stability analysis, height analysis, waste composition analysis, right down to the top 5 constituents of the waste and where they can be used. This information is not available to us on most waste dump sites, Nagesh, if I'm correct. When a contractor goes in, they go in very blind, knowing only that, okay, just treat the waste and sell it. It's very difficult to do if you haven't mapped where and what each waste particle can go. And if we do that properly, it can really, really help in monetizing the waste. I think there's a big role to be played in data collection. The second is technology. There is so much advancement in technology today, but the appetite to be able to absorb and pay for new technology is very limited. When we were running Waste to Wealth mission, or started the Waste to Wealth mission, we did a consultation with the leading VCs of India. And one of the interesting conclusions that they all came to is that they find it very hard to invest in environmental technologies in India. They said that these same technologies, some which were going to do biomining through laser, some which was going to utilize plastic for aviation fuel, they said if these same companies were incorporated in the UK or the US, they would invest without a thought. But here, because the payment stream is so public sector dependent, they don't touch these technologies. Why? We need to encourage this technology sector so that we have technologies which are local in nature. Then is investments. Like I mentioned, there are pools of investment outside the conventional waste field which we haven't tapped. If we can tap into them, and there are models for this. There is a whole idea of social bonds which around the world exist, in which you monetize future gains, right? Imagine monetizing the healthcare gains of a landfill. You can pay for any technology. The second issue is that margin. The waste treatment happens on the margins. We have to appreciate the marginal benefit from additional investment and not stop and pay a much larger fee later. There are emerging instruments to this effect, which I think all of us can champion, help pioneer. We are working, for example, as a company and advising the government of India on creating green credits, which is a new instrument. It has already been notified for trees, and now the next field is waste. Good waste management will be given credits which can then be sold to corporates. There are plastic credits, etc. The other issue is procurement, the fourth issue. Procurement is a problem. Most landfill operators do not understand sophisticated procurement. Like Nagesh mentioned, the idea of risk is not well understood. If it's disproportionately given to a Sahas or a Sigma, how will they manage that risk? The risk of failure cannot be just unilaterally given to one body. So I think it's very important to create templates and inform ULBs on better procurement. And lastly, behavior. I think that this whole issue of behavior change is so important, because like sir mentioned, if while you are emptying your landfills, you are going to keep getting thousands of tons of fresh waste in that same site every day, which is not sorted, not segregated, these mounds will never go away. So I think that this is an issue that requires all of us to work together. There are examples and case studies of technologies, there are databases, but we need a holistic investment environment to action these. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Swapan. Our next panelist is Mr. Deepak Arora, who is from Niara Energy, President, Public Affairs and Head. When we talk of biomining, we know that one constituent from biomining is something which we call refuse-derived fuel, which is a kind of pellets coming out of energy material in the waste. And since Niara Energy is about energy, I would like to ask Mr. Arora to put focus on if he finds presence of RDF in biomining any lucrative for his own business, and how he sees that whole issue.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you very much. And first of all, let me thank ISC for putting such a brilliant panel together. I think after probably 20 years, I have taken notes of this volume. So that also speaks volume of what the speakers have added to me. And I really go back much learned today. But let me answer your question in three parts. First, let me just introduce who we are and why we are here today. In the second part, let me just talk about a little bit about the industry and how the industry currently is addressing the challenge of reuse and waste management. And then in the third part, I will come to specifically your question of the legacy waste. So as Sunil mentioned, we are a refinery. We are into oil and gas. We are a fuel-based company, and we have three verticals in the business. We have a port, we have a power plant, and we have a refinery. And the refinery, we of course produce petrol, diesel, sulfur, and many other products, which are all consumed by most of us. Now, in each of these segments of business, there is a lot of reuse and lot of sustainability issues are being addressed. Let me pick up one by one. So, if I look at the refinery, the refinery waste is very minuscule. It is less than 0.5%, and that's how the technology has evolved. In fact, it's much lesser than 0.5% also. And in next few years, one will find that this will become a zero discharge refining. So that's where the industry is going. So which means that every drop of crude that you get will eventually be used. The final emission which the vehicle emits, there also you are seeing a lot of change. So you might reach that state also where that emission also becomes practically zero. So that's one chain where things are happening. Second is the power plant, which we have again in the integrated power plant, where there is a scope to use legacy waste, and I will come to that. And the third part is the port, where a lot of ships come, crude is offloaded, we load products and then they are sold. And these ships generally use heavy furnace oil, fuel oil, and now the way the technology is evolving, residue or whatever everybody leaves, including what the lube oil which traditionally would get dropped onto the soil, can be collected and then can be reprocessed to use in ships with very little emissions. So everywhere, because the industry has been in so much focus, the amount of efforts that have been made are also probably proportionate to the amount of noise that was there. So that's the second part of my discussion. Coming to the focus question, which is legacy waste. Now, legacy waste for us has again two different dimensions. One is the biomass part of it, which again I will talk much lesser about it, because we have a mandate now to blend 10% ethanol, which is all biomass, bio waste, which is now being converted into ethanol and then being used and blended in fuels. The second is methanol, for which experiments are going on, for which I think when you mentioned about methanol, and I think earlier also methane emissions were mentioned. Now, what is waste on this landfills is actually a resource for us. Now, the only thing is that today probably we don't have appropriate techniques to capture that methane, but yes, it's probably the most valuable resource, in fact, to that an extent where directly fuel can be replaced by methanol. So that's where the technology is evolving. So probably when we reach that stage, that question will also be answered. Then the third is the bio waste, which is in terms of the leaves, the twigs and the plants that are left. And I have heard somebody saying that in next 5 years we will not have a single leaf dropping on anywhere in the country because everything will be used up. So that's one direction in which the industry is moving. And is it good? Yes, it's absolutely good. There is one single data point which I will use for this. There is a study done by one of the research institutions in the UK, and the data point simply said in one line that if you are using towards sustainability and CSR, if you are this bio legacy waste, if you are processing and that is traveling 2300 kilometers by sea or 1265 kilometers by road, it is still economically viable. So I think that in one line answers the sustainability and CSR potential of using the legacy waste. Of course, the caveats are appropriate technology and certain other issues, which I again will speak about. So this is one particular landscape for us. Now coming to the legacy waste part of it. Now legacy waste again has three components. One is the tire derived fuel, which is very easy to use, not only for us but for everybody else also in the industry. The second is the solid recovery one, and the third is the alternate, which is the RDF that we are talking of. Now tire recovery is probably the easiest one because it's bulk, it's large size, collection is easy, similar to bottles. Other waste is really very difficult, and the volume, as I think earlier pointed out, there is a mix of wet waste, dry waste, segregation becomes a lot of challenge. So if you are not able to segregate at source, then it is really economically how viable it will be, we really don't know. The other issue which is very peculiar to the urban and the rural divide is availability of the RDF. Now in the area where we are, it's a rural area and the population density isn't that huge. Now, and there are two large dump sites which are there. One is 80 kilometers away and the other one is 50 kilometers away. Now the 50 kilometers away is a smaller site. Now you don't get much volume over there. The one which is 80 kilometers away is a much larger site. But and there are also processes which are already there. So what do you get in turn? Very limited. So access per se, because of your location, sometimes can become an issue. The volume can become an issue. The cleanliness or the hygiene factor can become an issue. The efforts required in many cases might be disproportionate. But then if you to sum it up, is there a value proposition lying for CSR? Then the answer in one word is a thumping yes. There is no other direction to be thought of. Ways, mechanisms, I think collectively with what we've discussed over here, there is a lot to do and there is a lot more to be done collectively by not only the businesses but also the community as a whole. Because if you don't segregate at source, and I think one very appropriate quote was made, I'm sorry, I have forgotten in so many notes where it was written. Mix it. If you mix it, you can't fix it. So I think that would be my last comment. If you mix it, we really can't fix it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Arora, for very interesting insight. What I'll do is now, since we have before the note came, I know that we have very little time left. So what we'll do is next round we'll do in a rapid fire mode, and 1 minute on your observations. We'll change a sequence a little. So I'll start with Mr. Swapan Mehra, and I'll ask him how does he what is the partnership opportunity which he sees between different players, because he was also at PSA, and I hope his stay at PSA was not so painstaking. Leaving his organization to join PSA was, but PSA probably was more pleasurable and learning experience for you.
No, absolutely. I think that firstly the stay was very, very pleasurable and exciting, not painstaking. I think that the key word which defines waste management or should define waste management is partnerships. I think we need partnerships with the private sector very much, not only through CSR but also through investments, also through technology, also through R&D, also through consumption of waste recycling. I think we need a range of partnerships. We need partnership with research and academic institutions, and they need to work together with corporates. I think this connect between research and the private sector, which is very weak in this country but is now starting to do really well in biotechnology. We need to learn from that field and replicate that to waste. We need contextual technologies and solutions suited to India. We cannot import very expensive Japanese technologies or very small scale Finnish technologies and roll them out en masse in India. We need that. Finally, we need the financial sector to step in and look at waste as an investment opportunity, and we need the government and organizations like FICCI to play a key role in ensuring and securing that investments. It's a risky space, but it's not And there are models for this. Look, today large companies are investing. I never thought in my life that I'll see large oil companies investing in forestry for carbon credits. It's an area they don't understand. It's risky. If they can do it there, why can't they do it in waste? So very important.
Thank you. Thank you so much. From where you ended, I'll move to Nagesh. And about his 1 minute pitch on how biomining process can be scaled out and replicated at the scale which is required, India being a large country.
Sunilji, when we started, what we saw was that there was an absolute lack of confidence in the urban and local bodies for private players like us to get into biomining. What it lacked was that there was no transparency. So we believed in the 4T philosophy, one of which Sapan already spoke: technology, transparency, traceability, and testing. Right? We invested a huge amount of time and energy in traveling to places. One of the countries that we hit upon was South Korea, right? And we spent about 6 months there. We understood back in 2016 they had already reclaimed close to 500 dump sites. Some of them reclaimed to Seoul World Cup Stadium, Suwon subway station, and residential complexes. And we knew that importing the technology, like Swapan mentioned, was completely expensive. It is going to be, not viable for India. So we called them into India. We manufactured those machines in India. We customized them because it was not an off-the-shelf solution, and then we worked it out here. Now, we've been working on this, and we also decided that we are not going to be penny-wise, pound foolish. We had a lot of losses in the initial stages, but we said we are not going to take shortcuts because there's enough shortcuts taken in the industry. We will not do it again. We'll have to prove our mettle and then go ahead. And the ULBs then came forward with open arms. That's why we would, we are today at the 9 million figure. Now, just one example that I want to tell you is that like our processing machines, if you come and visit 4 of my sites, they will be completely different, right? I think the machines will be common, but the way they have been configured is different because that is depending on the waste characteristics. The important part today, which even the government is emphasizing, is scale, right? If from the government side, the scale is important because they have no time. And from the private players side, the scale is important because I need to sweat my fixed assets, right? So it's important. So in order to do that, we'll have to work out of the box, and then we brought in these concepts, and then we worked very well. We also brought in a lot of programmers. We brought them on board. We made an ERP. We did not pick it up from the market. We built it ourselves. We said we are going to give these ERPs on handheld devices to the urban and local bodies where they can see everything live. So we did that. It was amazing, and now we are seeing that these ERP systems are made a part of the request for proposals. They're saying this has to be mandatory. Now this is a success, and as I previously mentioned, if we have to clear the humongous problem of legacy waste, we need large players to come into the foray, but in a very, very transparent manner. I know again technology is the key, and the ESG guidelines with transparency, traceability, and testing, which comes hand in hand. Now, this would give a clear picture and clear message to the people. So, second important thing is we are addressing the large and medium-sized dump sites. But what about the smaller ones? Now, we just saw Karnataka coming up with a very innovative model. What they've done is they've combined these clusters and they've made something called a cluster headquarters. And they're saying all the waste that is present in the smaller places could be brought into the cluster headquarters, and you can actually process it so that you have scale. So that attracts more and more companies to come in rather than hunting for smaller places and then you don't find people. There's some innovative approaches. I think cluster model is one of that. I think there's a lot to go. I am seeing a lot of development, and things looks very, very bright. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Arora. Industry is known for developing technologies, customizing technologies, monitoring and measurement, looking at setting up targets. So how industries can help not only contractors but also cities and ULBs with their technology packages to sort out some of these problems.
Okay, so four quick points. One, CSR obviously can be the risk capital part of it.
Sure.
Two, if you really want change at scale and a market mechanism to arrive like other industries in sustainability space, and for this to be successful, then businesses also have to be an investor in its waste management supply chain. That's the second point which I believe. Third, there has to be a buyer-seller relationship despite this, with or without this investor relationship, because that's where it really becomes, you become an active stakeholder and a participant. Fourth point, to answer your question on technology, yes, there is sufficient know-how available, because now the regulation for the private sector is so stringent that every emission of yours, every drop of what you release anywhere is monitored. So your access, understanding of technologies is far better. Your investment capabilities to invest in-house is far better. Now there is no mechanism of transfer of this know-how per se together. So a platform which actively works only on this would be the fourth point of recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Murugesh, we also have talked about of small opportunities, small legacy dump sites. So can we look at developing small businesses, particularly startups who get sufficient opportunity to develop this as a business model?
Yeah, absolutely. Collaboration is the name of the game. With so many startups coming up, very innovative solutions. However, there needs to be a lot of emphasis around keeping it simple. Stick to the fundamentals. Traditional also can work. So yeah, first point I would like to make is collaboration. There are enough proven solutions out there. It's just that we have to take it to scale. And for us to take it to scale, you need the right backing of technology. So at our organization, we use good level of technology as well, but then it's just an enabler. So you need to get on the ground and really, go through the grind, especially in the collection, transportation segment. So along with collaboration and technology as an enabler, it's a key aspect. However, nothing can happen without without the right financial instruments. We've seen that time and again, especially around plastics, and we know dump sites are all about plastics. There is a very big issue around working capital. So blended finance, etc., NBFCs, these are out there, government schemes are out there. It's more about how do we utilize them, how does it reach the startup world, and for them to be able to mobilize their solutions through the right level of financing instruments. So these were the top 3 bottlenecks challenges from my side. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And lastly, Mr. Prabhakar, how do you see opportunities if you what you say is as PPP, partnership between industry and here three-way partnership between industry, between hospital contractor, between urban local bodies, so that they can work more effectively?
I think 3 areas. When we want to sort of literally take a concept, what they say is lab to land, and do it at a scale basis. And I think it was mentioned that India is very heterogeneous. One solution in one location does not work. I think there's a tremendous scope for a partnership to create some base templates, which are, let's say, up to 70%, 80% applicable wherever you are, and then you play the 10%, 20%. So it almost becomes like a cookie cutter approach to a large extent for the ULBs. I think there's a tremendous scope at a national level for different people to come and maybe facilitated by a forum like ISC to do that. The second element I see may not necessarily be PPP, but much more work needs to be done in creating awareness and dissemination. I think we've been discussing legacy waste, but if you walk across, even in large, well-educated metro cities, all that we hear is the problem that we have with the landfills. But how each one of us actually played a role in leading to it and what we need to do going forward, I think there has to be a massive campaign. And it is here, in my view, that government, industry bodies, corporates, and this is where the CSR money can actually flow in a very significant way into sort of creating that sort of awareness, because time is of essence. The last point that I would say is from a PPP thing is, again, that was alluded, is a PPP which involves research bodies, scientific institutions, to demonstrate evidence and the cost of not doing things. And that is where that interdisciplinary approach that needs to be created. Today, it should not just be a problem of urban department or a rural development department. There is environment, there is climate, there is health. So how do we get all these people not just at a national level but also at a local ULB level? That is where again some sort of a PPP will help.
Thank you so much. I would call it cost of inaction. For some areas, for example, air pollution in most of the cities, we are beginning to realize that it is taking a huge toll on our human health. So what I'll do is, since we are almost up with the time, I'll not try to summarize it. If someone has a very burning kind of question which you feel that panelists have not addressed or touched upon, maybe we can take up that question. Otherwise, I'll thank my panelists and for excellent discussion which they had, and then formally close the session. Sure.
Raise very pertinent points, but how can we disrupt the current methods of payment? At each level, someone is either paying for collection or paying for some products. It's a very disrupted chain. We have the same in sewage treatment, that who is paying for what is seriously disrupted. In sewage treatment, the ideal would be that the payment should happen when the sewage is actually tipped into the facility which has to treat it. But we actually pay the guy the honeysucker, who takes it from us, and we have no idea where it goes. So the whole chain is disrupted because the mafias of collection already exist. How can we solve that? Because financing will cover each vertical that you cover, but there is a financing in place already in the chain which needs to be disrupted. And how can we start with that disruption?
Yeah, I can quickly take that. I'm borrowing a word from Nagesh. It's called traceability. It works very well, and we've been able to prove it on the ground as well. It's been able to bring in business viability in waste management. Unfortunately, it does not exist at all. And the second concept is, if you don't look at it as an ecosystem, if you take waste management at our organization, we've split it into 9 tiers, and we have to look at it completely end to end, holistic, and then look at traceability. That's the solution.
The solution exists.
So I'll not try to add up anything because we are already 1 minute overshot. So I'll thank my panelists for excellent remarks, and maybe I'll conclude it and share it with IC and FICCI in my separate note with permission of my panelists. And I'll formally close the session and request you to give them a big round of applause before we move from here.